Hi everyone, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can check it out at filmmakeru.com. Every week, we have a guest to talk about their work at 2 p.m. on Fridays. And today, I'm being joined by Todd Desrosiers. He edited the Umbrella Academy, Tales from the Loop, Fear of the Walking Dead, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, among many others. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I guess my first question is Tales from the Loop is very tone heavy. So when you're working on a project that is sort of, I guess, saturated in tone, how do you like to approach it to make sure you get the right feeling for the audience?
Yeah, well, that one was really special. Mostly for that one, Nathaniel Halpern, he was our showrunner, and we had a lot of conversations with him before we started. There was a long, lengthy email. I came on the second episode. There was a long, lengthy email for the rest of the team as far as how he wanted to approach that show. And he was fundamentally opposed to traditional television sort of coverage. And so he really wanted to take time with that and explore silence and spaces and more like Kieslowski European sort of stylistic influence. And so it really was sort of a back and forth approach, but it was sort of freeing because you didn't have to feel like this almost tempo in the back of your head. I have to cut now. I have to cut now. It was almost pushing back against that natural instinct that we've all had from watching television and how the sort of pacing of it is being pushed forward almost all the time. Every show seems to have this appetite for pace. We have to suck the air out of it just to keep the momentum building. And that one was almost opposite and almost daring you to stay longer. And just hopefully the idea was going to be that you're going to be able to sort of get more an emotional connection to the characters on screen. And it was a lot of back and forth and a lot of, he's like, okay, the first cut was super long that I sent to him. Like I gave him the full Kieslowski and he's like, okay, I for me, that's great, but I'm going to have to dial it back a little bit. And so we just kind of found, a method in that sort of madness to get to what I think is one of the most delicately beautiful shows I've had a good opportunity to work on.
So you referenced Kieslowski there, and I'm wondering when you're working with directors, do you use a lot of the I guess cinematic history as your dialogue between you and them?
Depends on the director, and some you'll have more that are, it's actually rare. Unfortunately, he's just this really nice human being and kind, but just so smart. And he just really was trying to push us in a direction that you don't find in American television for certainly. It's rare. And honestly, there was a lot of pushback from the studio. They just didn't really kind of grasp it as heavily as I think he was wanting them to. Mm-hmm. But overall, he was he was really trying to push the envelope. And for other directors, sometimes there'll be that sort of shorthand, but overall, I actually find it less so. I think it's just sort of we're taking a case by case basis, and there might be, we want this thing to feel like there will be blood or a PTA thing or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I think because it's what seems to happen is there's not enough time. So when you're getting a chance to chat with the directors, a lot of the times they are so focused on these other things that you finally get them in the 4 or 5 days you have to work with them in the room. And if it's just so heavy in terms of like, let's get to work. So again, it's a case by case basis, but it doesn't happen that often.
Well, it's interesting because I almost feel like that would help speed up the process if I could be like, well, have you seen this film from the French New Wave movement?
And exactly. No, yeah.
Check it out. Is there a particular? Oh, sorry.
No, that's a great point. It certainly would. I think depends. If it's an established show, it already has a look and feel anyway. Mm-hmm. And if it's a pilot, then there might be more of that to go around. But I will say that it feels like if it's not spoken out loud, then pilot directors are always trying to sort of push an envelope further away from where that studio might want to go. It's happened on the last couple go rounds when I've done pilots where I wouldn't say experimental, but they are, as one director said, I'm going to try to scare you with mood, you know, and all the, it's always happened where we've sort of walked it back once we've gotten to the showrunner phase of it and the studio notes phase of it. But the further they push on their director's cut, at least some of it still will remain and give the show a little bit more of a signature feel. That's what you hope.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also worked on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and that was a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Were you worried about jumping into that universe and that has sort of got this long history to it now?
Yeah, I was. In some ways, I was really excited, but also worried. I first interviewed on it in person, and I met with Victoria Alonso and Nate Moore and Zoe Nagelhoot, and the three of them and I were chit-chatting about everything. But my biggest fear was being part of a team, since they were coming from the feature world and getting into the streaming world, and making something that's not quite TV, not quite feature, something in the middle. Mm-hmm. But there's this canon of movies that I think are amazing. And I have an 11-year-old, and over the years, we've watched the movies together. And so they hold a real special place in my heart. And so one of the things I said is I don't want to be part of the team that messes this up, because it's really kind of special. And you guys really are making some amazing features, really entertaining stories that are also a little bit, in some ways, especially with Falcon and Winter Soldier, like pushing the envelope in the kind of storytelling ways. A lot of people, especially that series, was going to a really good direction in terms of, for example, having Anthony Mackie, Sam Wilson's now going to be the Captain America, and that was really shaking up the narrative, especially at this time where we find ourselves in the United States and the world. So it's really, they're doing a lot of special work, and I didn't want to be part of the crew that messed it up. So.
Well, it's funny that you would say that, because when I talked to Wyatt Smith when he was on Doctor Strange, he said the same thing. So there must be a sense of pressure. Like, how do you?
Yeah, it's the big leagues.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're bringing you into their world, and their world, they've got it working pretty well. So if it's going to go awry, it's kind of, the finger's going to be pointing back at you, like, this is the new person, this isn't working. And so, yeah, I love all the movies. And so, I kind of figured out early on that particular one, even though, we're going to sort of challenge expectations, you do want to deliver what's expected as a fan. Initially that was going to be the first Disney Plus show, and with COVID and everything else, everything got shaken up with schedules and shutdowns. And so WandaVision went first, but we were going to be the first one out, and that was going to be, as a fan, if I wasn't working on it and I'm going to like, oh, cool, Disney Plus is doing Marvel now, that's awesome, I want to check it out, I know what I would want to see. So I kind of had that in the back of my head the entire time, as far as working on it. And the other good thing too is, at the touch of a button, you can watch all the movies in the editing room. So, and I'm a big fan of Jeff Ford's work and everything he has done before, especially with the Captain America franchise, I guess, within that, and the storylines and the characters. And so I just was really concentrating on honoring that and putting my best foot forward, and stylistically.
This is kind of a personal question, but for me, it's a personal question, because I would like to know, because Jeff went with Captain America, Dan Liebenthal did a lot with Iron Man. Does Marvel try and line up their editors with particular characters?
If they do, it's not for me to know. I just know, as far as working, with Jeff, but also having seen his body of work, he's been really there from the beginning. He was on the first Captain America movie. So, and then the Winter Soldier is an amazing, it's one of my favorites. And there's an action set piece in that thing that just blows my mind every single time I watch it. a lot, just to sort of either get inspired or like, oh yeah. So I wouldn't know that, the inner workings. They're pretty secretive as far as the hiring process.
Well,
But can't go wrong if you hire those guys. So
yeah.
why wouldn't
Well,
you?
and Jeff's fantastic, and so's Dan
Hmm.
and all the crew. Now, when I've talked to sound designers who've worked on the Marvel projects, they design, like, for Captain America, they've designed numerous sounds for his shields and all these things that sort of
Yeah.
are become the go-to library, or it's I guess sort of like a character specific sound. Is there things when you got onto the show that they were like, this is how we're editing, or this is how we're approaching the edit because of Captain America, or because it's this character?
No, it's no overt conversations. I think, if they're bringing you on, there's expectations of like he or she can do the job. And you just, I think you would get to that process pretty quickly. You would find out that's not what we're looking for. That's not what, once the cuts go out past, let's say, Kari, working with her, you go to Nate and you go to Zoe, and there might be some sort of subtle pushback. But I mean, I think if you talk about sound design specifically, that was sort of one of the fun things. Again, it's sort of like you open up a bin and there's all the amazing sound effects that have been libraried from over the years, and so that's a great place to start. And do like to have a pretty good temp as far as sound design goes. But Brian Beal, when I first got there, he was my assistant. And he traditionally, over the years, we've developed pretty good shorthand. So I'll be building the scenes and he'll be taking them, and then he'll be doing like a first pass at the sound design. And then I'll listen to it and give him notes. And if there's tweaks I need to make, I will. So there was conversations between the two of us, but we both are fans of what it is, Marvel. So it was pretty easy to go the right direction early on, because you're just so happy to be there. The first scene I had that had a shield throwing was awesome just for me on a personal level. It was like, oh, cool, this is great. I'm finally, so let's go to the shield sounds. And I mean, there might be a danger of overdoing it, like over baking it. Like, hey, we can, it doesn't need to, each slight move, you don't need to hear the big shield sound. But it was still fun. It was fun to be creative using all the toys that they provided.
Now, you mentioned the particular scene from Winter Soldier, but is there a scene that Jeff did? But is there a scene in the Falcon and the Winter Soldier that you got to work on that you're proud of?
Oh, there's a bunch. Yes, all of them in some ways, just because of the nature. I mean, there's a couple easy, obvious answers. The truck top was exceptionally difficult to really pull off for a number of reasons, but the big fight between Walker and Sebastian there, the Winter Soldier and the Falcon, that was awesome. That was so much fun to work on. That I enjoyed that one. But those are the easy, most obvious answers. But to be quite truthful to what I feel is the best scenes that I got to work on. It's anytime, Elijah and Sam were having those discussions, those are really important scenes, and really emotional scenes. And so those were, and long, especially that second one in episode 5, it was really special. And then I think the shield throwing scene between Sam and Bucky at the end of the day, that's one of my favorite scenes. It was also super challenging from a number of different reasons, but that encapsulated, I think, the whole series, that relationship. And that's why you wanted to see, the show, is you want to see those two guys together. And the banter they have is awesome. And that's what kind of, keeps the story alive and from taking itself too seriously. But at the end of the day, the conversation that they're having is really, it's the series in one scene. And so you don't want to mess it up,
Now, you mentioned some of the scenes had challenges. What were some of the challenges on the series that you encountered?
Challenges?
Yeah.
Overall, the schedule was a huge challenge. Early on, there was an earthquake in Puerto Rico. And so what happened was they had to rearrange a lot of different things because they had planned to go out there for 6 weeks and they just couldn't go. So now suddenly scenes that weren't up, that were part of my episode suddenly were, and they were, really trying to move an army to, okay, this was supposed to be 6 weeks away, but now it has to be now because of the nature of the schedule while we try to figure that out. And so that became a challenge in terms of workload. And then after that, there was the challenge of COVID. I mean, that's, and the shutdown and then coming back eventually. And I think everybody who was working at that time was dealing with similar challenges. But since we had already had that first schedule hiccup happen to us and then COVID, it was sort of a double whammy. And so getting us out of that was a big reason why Jeff Ford came on too, because we had the end runway got really tight for us in terms of finishing the show and all that too. So.
Wow. Now you also worked on the Umbrella Academy. I feel like that was a huge success that I don't know if people were expecting it. We're expecting it to come out even. It's like it was announced or whatever, but it sort of caught a lot of people I know off guard. What was it like working on that project?
Yeah, it was so, I mean, the people were great. I worked the first season and, top down, everybody got a chance to work with were great. And the show itself, the tone of that show and the style of that show was really unique, and so I think it can be a little bit polarizing, either like you really love that show or you just don't get it. And so, but thankfully a lot of people really love it. And, for me, especially because I didn't really know too much about the graphic novel, right? So I came in a little bit more like a stranger to it, but the characters and stylistically, it was all really fun to embrace. And where I really started to feel like this is going to be pretty popular is at the time my parents had come to visit and was working on a scene. And so just kind of, they came in and they kind of gave them a sneak peek, and they really responded to, I'm like, this really, you like, but I didn't think that age group would really like the show, but man, they really did. It was one of the ones I worked on that they were big fans of. So I'm like, okay, this is going to maybe have a wider audience than I was expecting, maybe 18 to sort of 25. But I mean, and my 11-year-old really liked it. And although it can get a little bit graphic at times. So we had it was real fun that first season making the show, because it was a lot of discovery. And to pull something like that off for a first season, especially towards the end when schedules are always tightening up, and the episode was pretty ambitious. It was really challenging, but at the end of the day, I'm really proud of the work on that first season.
Now you mentioned you hadn't read the comic, but you've also worked on The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
How do you try to read any of the books, or how do you prepare when you have content that's pre-made in a sense?
Right. Well, with The Walking Dead, initially what happened was there was an editor on the 5th season that had to leave. I think he got a feature or something, and the schedule got pulled up on him, so he had to leave the show. So I got a call from Paul Gadd. At the time he was the co-producer of that show, and he's like, "Hey, it's Paul Gadd at The Walking Dead. We want to see if you're available to come work on the show." And I was finishing up another show called The Affair, that first seasons. And I first thought somebody was pranking me, because it's rare to get a call like that from, at that time, Walking Dead was the biggest show on television. And so when I met and I got hired, because just the nature of things get pretty busy, and it's hard, especially with kids, to continue to watch the massive amount of television that's out there. I had stopped watching after season 3. And so I had to catch up really quickly. And also, yes, for that show, I delved into the graphic novels a little bit, especially the area around my episode, just to take as much in as possible. But, they're also taking liberties away from the graphic novel. So it was helpful to see it. I also got to see where the storyline was going and what was going to eventually happen to Glenn, which took everybody by surprise a couple of years later when that did. But when I started delving into the graphic novel and I saw that, I'm like, are they gonna do that? That's just crazy. And there was debate, on whether they were at that point in time. But so it depends. There hasn't been that many opportunities where there is pre-existing material like that on the things that I've worked on. But in that's one case I did. For Fear the Walking Dead, no, because also that I did the pilot of that originally right after I had done the Walking Dead episode, and they were kind of in the same universe, but at that point in time they were stylistically very different. One was 16 millimeter, one was shot 35, and one was more traditional, if you know The Walking Dead, at least at that time. Traditional sort of coverage and wides and tights and stuff. And with Fear the Walking Dead, it was a little bit looser with more handheld. So I didn't really have anything to sort of look into in Fear. We were kind of discovering that and making our own sort of version as we did that first episode.
When you've talked earlier, you said about pilots that, like they're more challenging and there's more sort of work around them in terms of finding a style. So what were the challenges in the Fear of the Walking Dead and figuring out that first episode?
Yeah, well, because especially that one, that's unique. I've worked on some other pilots where it's its own entity. Actually, for Fear, I also did the 12 Monkeys pilot. So those two are a little bit similar because there's something that pre-exists. But in both of those cases, they're trying to take it a completely different way. It's not Gary Gilliam version of 12 Monkeys, and this isn't going to be, the original at all. They were trying to create something different of the same universe. So the challenge with any pilot is schedule and, you're finding your own way. You're creating the sort of world. And so there's a lot of, that's too far this way. Or, especially if there's a lot of cooks above in terms of producers and the studio and all those voices. You are trying to feel free enough to sort of create something and work with the director and showrunner. At the same time, there will be a lot of, since it's brand new, there is no path. You are blazing the path. You're going to come up against a lot of pushback, and on every level. If it's not going to be just the look and feel of it, but what are the characters, and then also what is the sound, what is the music, everything is going to be. Versus, let's say you're on season 3, there's already a sort of an established look and feel, so it's a little bit easier to get into a sort of groove. Whereas this one, you're creating it, and you have to be, willing to go through a lot of turbulence, especially those early days, as you work your way up as these episodes finish. And also is it a pilot or is it a pilot with a series? And that's also a challenge. Nosferatu, I did the pilot of that, but it was already AMC had picked up the series. And initially I was supposed to do, I keep saying series, and my laptop keeps putting up Siri on me, which is funny. Keeps asking me. I didn't get that. But with Nosferatu, initially it was multiple episodes already in line, and so I was scheduled to do episode 1 and then also come in and do episode 4, because usually that's sort of depending on the way the show works. If there's 3 editors, they'll rotate through. But 1 took up so much time and space, I wasn't able to get to 4. Wow. And so I kind of just, the other editor had to swoop in and they had to figure it out. And we just continued to work on 1 until my time on that was done. We locked, and then I was jumping over to another series that I was already committed to. Because I had a relationship with the showrunner there, Jamie O'Brien. She's an amazing writer in person. And so she asked if I would come. I had worked with her on Hell on Wheels. And so she asked if I would come and do the pilot, and I said yes. And they said I just am already committed to something a couple months out, and it was we worked it out. But it just, the amount of work on that pilot made it impossible to do that next episode, just because you could never get to it, and it would hurt the pilot if I was trying to do the other one.
Now,
and that's the most important one. There is so much running. That depends on how well that first one does.
Now, I have one last question that I like to ask everyone I interview. We've been in this pandemic for over a year now. A lot of people are still stuck in their houses, depending on where they are in the world. So, what show or movie did you discover on streaming service in the past year that you think people should check out?
That's what's funny about that is between the amount of work and kids, it's really hard to find time to watch shows. And this is going to be a little bit of a curveball for you, but for whatever reason, because I'm doing these dark zombie shows or, or end of the world shows or killer shows, I kind of will drift towards comedy. For me, especially like I didn't catch Always Sunny when it first came out, so I'm binge watching Always Sunny just to sort of laugh. But also there's this awesome show, and it's not narrative at all. It's called Escape to the Chateau, I think. It's awesome. It's this I guess it's an Irish and English couple. It's reality, and they have bought a French chateau castle with like very little money, and they're fixing it up on their own because they're going to do weddings and stuff, and they have 2 kids. And my partner and I, Christina, we watched that together at the end of the day, and it's because it's romantic and it's nothing expected, and it's an easy watch because if I can get like 1 hour between, because like what I try to do is I carve out time to take care of the baby and do dinner, and then watch a little show, and then I'll come back and I'll work until like midnight or 1, just to keep up with the show I'm currently on. So this is a fun escapism for me, literally escape to the chateau. So I'd recommend that one if you like a little escapism, romance, reality with a charming couple that are inspiring. It's fun. Or anything Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Like I'm kind of going back and I'm binge watching all those.
I love JB Smooth in Curb.
Oh my god, Lampin. No, that's my favorite. Yeah, and actually, really quickly too, when I was working on the Winter Soldier in the beginning, we were in Atlanta, and WandaVision was in the neighboring suite in the same building at Pinewood. And Tim, one of the editors on WandaVision, I was just having a coffee discussion about stuff. How are you? And I found out he went between doing Curb Your Enthusiasm and Always Sunny. And I'm like, you have my dream. I worked on a show called Californication, and it was a funny, fun show. And I loved that, laughing at dailies. And I was like, it must be so much fun. Like your day must be like you're laughing while you're working. And really was envious and jealous because Curb and Always Sunny are just genius comedy shows.
Well, especially Always Sunny is just so
oh man, 15 seasons too, I think, right? Something like that. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny to bring it all home. What's really funny about that is I heard an interview with, I think it was Roy McElhenney, and he said the reason they're still doing them is because he talked to Larry David and was like, what's the secret behind Seinfeld, or what would you say to someone? And apparently Larry David was like, my biggest mistake was we chose to end Seinfeld. Keep going until they stop giving you money.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so they were like, because he was like, because it was so hard for him to get the next thing up and running.
Right.
Like, just keep going. As long as they give you money, just keep going. And so they were like, yeah, that's true. Like, what are the chances that they'll give us another show after this? So
right. Yeah, Rob McElhenney. Yeah, I know Mythic Quest is his next one, right? And that one is one I guess I can put on the list. I'm trying to watch that one with my 11-year-old when he's here, and it's a show, and I'm like, it's Rob McElhenney. I know Always Sunny is definitely not 11-year-old material. Maybe it is nowadays. I don't know, but I think that Mythic Quest so far, we've watched the first 3 episodes, and we enjoy it. It's fun to be able to watch something with him that's right up his alley because he's a massive video game guy. He lets me know what video games they're using in that show all the time. So Mythic Quest is one to add to that list.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview.
Oh man, no, it's great to meet you. It was
great to meet you. Next time you're in Toronto, you'll have to grab coffee with me.
I will, and we'll go watch what was it? The minor league team, the Marnies? Is that?
Sorry?
What's the minor league team that you said you watched? The
Marlies, yes.
The Marlies?
Sorry, I thought you meant a show, and I was like, oh.
Oh yeah, no. We'll go catch one of those games. And you can tell me all about it.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right.